Good afternoon. It's really pleasant out now. There's a slight wind. We had a rain. It cleared out the heat. It'll be back tomorrow, but right now it's pretty good. I've been trying to analyze, for me, what I see when I see Justice Department employees basically defending the department for having done nothing. I mean, nothing. And I'm very curious why they want to get the information from the committee. And there's been an argument that's developing that, oh, the committee's just collecting information. That's not evidence. Oh, I'm sorry, but it is evidence. And you didn't collect it. That is, you, the Justice Department. But the worst argument, and I was surprised to hear it come from Congressman Schiff, who was a former AUSA. And when he ran for office, I was up on the Hill, and he won't remember it because it was an incidental meeting, but we were talking about his race out in California when he visited the Hill. And I've seen him in green rooms all the time, and he's always been spot on. Okay, so all that's a preface to say, so what's my beef? Well, I don't know if it's a beef, but he said on TV during the talking heads period of the day that you had to prove to a grand jury beyond a reasonable doubt. Whoa, that's not the law. Now, the Department of Justice may think that's the law. They may demand that you do that, but that is not the law. So what is it if it's not that? It's probable cause. Is there probable cause that a crime happened here? And that is all that's required to issue an indictment, probable cause. And, you know, if you wanted a super grand jury, you'd want them all to agree. They don't have to all agree. It's a majority of the grand jury, basically. There's a number. So, what is going on here? Well, let's do a thought experiment. We're not Einstein, of course, but that's what he did. Here's the thought experiment. Probable cause. I'm presenting evidence that, say, Trump, to show his intent, is on a tape recording telling the Secretary of State in Georgia certain things, namely, just give me those votes. That's very powerful evidence. And in a conspiracy, that evidence would get in my opinion. And a lot of other evidence would get in. So I see a conspiracy pretty easily here. Now, how do I compare it to beyond a reasonable doubt? Well, what's a reasonable doubt? When does that occur? That occurs at trial. And why? Because the defense, either by cross or by putting on its own evidence, says, there, that's a reasonable doubt. So a prosecutor who's going to tell a grand jury, this standard we're going to apply here is beyond a reasonable doubt. And I'll get into what the grand jury's role is in a minute. So if you're a grand jury, you'd say, okay, so what is the defense here? That would present a reasonable doubt. Oh, no, we don't present that to the grand jury. We don't present that evidence. Well, then how do you know it's beyond a reasonable doubt? Are you going to tell us the things that are wrong with your case that you think might suggest reasonable doubt and then explain to us why it's not reasonable doubt? No, I'm not going to do that. So what's going on here? Well, let's talk about fact instead of fiction, or myth, if you will. A prosecutor writes an indictment based on the evidence he presents. Some or a lot of it can be hearsay evidence, meaning an agent reports what 3 other witnesses said instead of bringing in those 3 witnesses. That's hearsay. But it's admissible in the grand jury for the purposes of getting an indictment. But here's the real killer. The prosecutor runs the grand jury. They don't see a witness that he doesn't bring there, or she. They hear the arguments from the prosecutor. But in the very few cases where there's a runaway grand jury, everything is determined by the prosecutor. So this beyond a reasonable doubt thing is a shibboleth. It is created to give even more control in a public forum to the argument that, oh yeah, there was evidence of stuff, but not enough to prosecute Donald Trump, don't believe your lying eyes or your ears. That this guy, he did bad things, and he should be condemned for it, but it's not criminal. That's the setup. And we have data points to suggest the Justice Department's not dealing straightly with us here, because they waited how many months? And they still have not had a single member of the inner sanctum in the West Wing before a grand jury. They haven't been interviewed in their offices. I doubt that they've subpoenaed any of their records, which may be destroyed and missing by the time they get around to it. They're telegraphing that now they're going to look at these people, but they're not bringing them in. So any dolt that they're looking at may say, hey, maybe I should get rid of that before they pull it out. So what am I saying? I'm saying the Department of Justice is not an honest broker, and that we have former members of the Justice Department who are defending the department's vague ambiguity about doing anything at all, either past or prospectively. This is Mueller 2, in my opinion, Democratic version. We know Barr, there was no holds barred for Barr when it came to being the mouthpiece for the former president, Mr. Trump. But what is this about? Well, this is about a philosophy. Oh, we don't want to go against the president, the former president, because he might win. They do call it trying a case. And if you can't try this case, then you can't try any case. We got tape recordings, we got admissions, we got statements, we got books, we got documents, we have calendars, we have phone records, we have travel records, no doubt. We have a tape recording of the president himself. And somewhere along the line, if this had been done right, we would have at least one or two cooperating people in addition to all of these exhibits. Instead, we're being told why nothing has happened. I have a fear that what justice is about is to get that in, and I've said it even in this comment here, that what justice is about, and its defenders and apologists, is, that's great what they did on the Hill, but it's not evidence. Now, this does two things. One is it emboldens Trump and his supporters, and it hurts the Democrats who have done a legitimate and honest job of collecting real evidence and real testimony that sticks. So why does the Justice Department not want this to stick? Why do they want to let this guy Trump wander off and commit more crimes as he declares himself for office? I'd like to believe it's as simple as the philosophy that it's unpredictable what the political fallout will be if we prosecute, for the first time in American history, a former president. It's possible. But I also think that is a failure to live up to the oath of office to preserve and protect our nation and our democracy. And I think any person that is so interested in defending the department and doing nothing for the purpose that is entirely political is a person who should be thrown out of office. I'm talking about the AG. What is he doing there? It was very interesting. He didn't even answer the question directly. If he was a real man, when said, so what about Trump? He would have said, look, if the evidence is there, we'll prosecute Trump. That's what he should have said. But he didn't. Now, was his hesitation because he never intends to do it and he's going to offer up some fifth stringer in this ongoing conspiracy? Perhaps. It feels that way. And what's a real shame is to see prosecutors who know better pretend that the grand jury isn't a function of the prosecutor. The prosecutor decides what's probable cause or beyond a reasonable doubt. The prosecutor drafts the indictment. The prosecutor asks them to vote on the indictment. The prosecutor makes it public after a judge takes the vote of the grand jury. So what is this about? It's another game they're playing on us, and they do it. They did it with Mueller, and they got us. They're not getting us again. And when you hear people say, oh, they haven't started yet, but they will. Really? This is like Johnny doing his homework, although I want you to know I did my homework all the time. I was a really square kid. You can see I'm so different now. So my final word on this is I'm furious that we have people making excuses for not investigating the greatest crime in American history by the highest level personalities, and who are giving a standard of proof for a grand jury that is not the law, that is a preference of the Department of Justice, so they can finagle advantages for those who soar above the law, who have a higher standard of proof before they can be indicted. I think they'd probably find some way to help Trump get around driving through an intersection, all red lights at 100 miles an hour. But Trump said it himself. He could go down Broadway and shoot somebody. And if Garland was the DA in Manhattan, he wouldn't prosecute him, I bet. He'd make excuses. Oh, it's not beyond a reasonable doubt. Maybe it was a mistaken identity, this orange-haired mass. So that's what I got today. We have to defend the committee to do its work and not be slandered by a too lazy Justice Department that can't and hasn't gotten its act together. We have to push Garland to either do his job or to get an independent prosecutor who will. And we have to use this information in the upcoming election, because anybody who supports the fact that the election was a fraud and thinks that Trump is a worthy candidate for president again is not a patriot, is not a Democrat, small d, not a Republican, small r, but an autocrat, a monarchist in the tradition of Alexander Hamilton and all those Federalists who first cooked up their view of what the government should be. So, if I get out tomorrow, I'll talk to you. Bye-bye.